So I recently got back from a trip where I went to the UK for the third time. 3 times now I've been to the UK. First 2 times were in London, and they were 2 totally different experiences. Both of them were very fun. Now that I've gone back for a third time, I don't know why I keep moving my hands with threes, it doesn't matter. I went to a place where almost a lot of people from the UK are like, why in the hell did you go there? And that city was called Derby. Or if you go to the UK, they say Derby. Or at least that's what the people in the UK were telling me. So I had an opportunity to go to Derby and eventually Nottingham. And one of the coolest places that I saw in Derby specifically, because there was I'm not saying there wasn't a lot of cool places. There was definitely a lot of cool things to see. But the most famous one is this place called the Museum of Making. So the museum that we went to, called the Museum of Making, was originally a silk mill that has now been changed into the Museum of Making to show kind of the history of Derby, not Derby, my bad. That is my American accent coming out, my bad. Derby, not Derby. I just want to see Derby. I just feel like, okay, it's a Derby. It's like a Derby, doesn't matter. So some of the cool things that I saw in there had to do with Rolls-Royce, the company, and how you can easily see that there was the first aero engine that was designed by Sir Henry Royce himself, and it was built by Rolls-Royce in Derby specifically. It was called the Rolls-Royce Eagle 8, I believe. There were some really cool old looking maps that I saw there specifically about Derby and Derbyshire that were really old and amazing to look at. There was also this really cool interactive map where you can see all the places Derby was exporting certain items to different parts of the world, and it was really cool to see. Derby basically had attracted skilled and experienced workers for around 2,000 years. So most people really didn't want to settle there, but they would at least migrate in there for a better life for themselves and their families. Many were and still are technically attracted by the opportunities that the city did offer because it played a really huge manufacturing role for the British colonies at the time, while others basically came seeking refuge from conflict and persecutions. Yeah, so far we've seen some crazy things like pipes made out of wood, so instead of iron. It's kind of crazy. Seeing a funny bull that was kind of scared from the drawing. So one of the coolest things that I saw in that museum that I was just not at all expecting to see, that is not old, I mean it's kind of old, but not comparative to all the cool history that the UK has specifically, was a video game that I really liked that was created in Derby. And that video game is Tomb Raider, which was literally created in 1996. It was originally developed by Derby-based game company Core Design. The game is a multi-level action adventure featuring Lara Croft as a globe-trotting archaeologist seeking out lost treasure. So yeah, I don't know, I played the games when I was a kid, and I was like, whoa, that's crazy. I had no clue it was created here in Derby. It's a small city in the UK. I was like, that's really cool. So originally this museum was actually famous for making silk. They've obviously converted it into a museum. So you kind of see some things with that. It's like this thing right here. Shows kind of some of the silk stuff that they've made. So it's really cool. It's really interesting. Eventually we made it to a really cool section, since the museum is called the Museum of Making. There was a bunch of things that were created or made in Derby that was supposed to help inspire other people to create new things. This section specifically was called the assemblage, or assemblage. I don't know how you describe it. Basically it was grouped by materials, stones, ceramics, glass, metals, textiles, organic, synthetic, and wood materials. Basically the local people who helped make the Museum of Making thought it'd be really cool for visitors to find objects to inspire their own making. The assemblage is a bit like a museum store, but it is a space where you can explore, and is laid out it's basically laid out in grid by number, letter, and color, with all these different items and objects that have been created or made. It had items basically ranging from signs to engines to furniture, appliances, everyday things basically people in Derby would use. This section was laid out really cool with a lot of things you can interact with, things you could slide, and there was just a lot of history to see here. Now the next section I found very interesting that I went to was actually this really cool giant diorama of the Midland Railway. So this model railway was basically Kirtley Junction. It was a model representing the Midland Railway in Derbyshire in the summer of 1906. It was a scale of basically 1 to 43. Basically the Midland Railway was a railway company in the United Kingdom from 1844. It was by far one of the largest railway companies in Britain in the early 20th century, and it was the largest employer in Derby. It had a huge network basically stretching from London London, St. Pancras. I know it's not pronounced pancreas. The first thing I think of when I see that in real life is pancreas. Also Manchester, Birmingham, Bristol. It originated basically in 1832 in Nottinghamshire. And like I said earlier, this basically showed the Kirtley Junction. And there was a lot of cool information basically in this section talking about this entire railway system. There was so much to cover in this museum that obviously I was not even going to come close to talking about everything that I saw there that I really liked. And while the history of the building is really old, it was created in 1721, and like I said earlier, it was a silk mill. The museum itself is actually pretty new because it technically only opened in 2021. So if you're ever in Derby, I really suggest going into this museum, and it was an amazing experience. Especially because when I talk to other UK people, they're like, why'd you go to Derby? There's nothing to do there. Well, you can do this. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give that thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. Thank you for watching. I'll see you on the next one.